Hey there, we are Rob and Joanna Tigan. Welcome back to the Growing Home Together podcast. We've been married for over 30 years and we've parented our 5 kids through all the ages and stages. We're excited to share our passion for caring for the soul of your family with you. Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Thank you for joining us for the Growing Home Together podcast. Today, Rob and I just wanted to share a little of our marriage story when depression was making an impact on our relationship. If you and your spouse are going through a hard season or a mental health issue is taking its toll, we hope this time with you will bring some help and encouragement your way.
So Joanna and I have been married over 30 years now and have 5 kids. But what I didn't know way back at the birth of our 3rd child is that 1 in 7 women have experienced postpartum depression after the birth of their child. I didn't know that postpartum depression can wear a lot of faces like sadness, anxiety, panic attacks, anger, and intrusive thoughts. I didn't know that my wife, Joanna, had several of the risk factors that can lead to PPD, like a personal and family history of depression, a lack of social support, and hormone imbalance. I didn't know that the birth of our baby would move us into one of the hardest valleys we faced as a couple.
Right. We definitely didn't know what we didn't know, right, Rob?
For sure.
Yeah. So both of us were blindsided when I fell into a severe depression that really changed our lives for a while. And I think what stands out about that season is just how I felt like my emotions were this roller coaster ride. I mean, one minute I was feeling all the love for the baby, and the next I would be crying, and then the next I would lose my temper with the kids over nothing. And I felt like I couldn't trust myself to be calm and consistent as a mom. So I just started to pull away from everybody. And Rob, I also remember this weird sense of confusion, like I was struggling to make the little daily decisions or even to just use common sense sometimes. And then the fun part, the depression really found its voice, and it was telling me that I was a terrible person. Everybody would be better off without me, and that I should isolate as much as possible to minimize the damage that I might do to our family. So it was a really dark and confusing time for me, and I had no idea how to climb out of the pit. But I know since, Rob, we were married, that as I was going through that experience, you were going through it too, because we're in this thing together. So what would you say it was like for you at that time?
You know, I think it was the same. It was kind of a whirlwind of trying to figure out what you were going through, how to support you, and then just trying to keep things going, trying to figure out, have time for you and figure out what you were experiencing. I felt like I was living with you at one point and the kids at another, because you did isolate yourself. And so you were off on your own. And so I felt like here I am with the kids and I'm trying to keep things as normal as possible for them. And yet at the same time, trying to address what you're feeling. I just remember a lot of confusion then, because it was like we'd already had 2 kids, and so it didn't even cross my mind that it was related to the birth or anything. I just thought, it was, I just was confused and we hadn't walked that journey before. In all honesty, I think I was kind of in guy mode, like, how do we fix this, I discovered pretty early on that there wasn't probably an easy fix to it. So then it was just a matter of all hands on deck and just trying to keep, I think I tend to be a pleaser anyway. So I think it was just trying to keep everybody happy.
Yeah. And I remember, you showed up, day after day after day. Bedtime stories and bath time, and those dinner dishes got done, and the kids were getting to go to the park with you. You really showed up. And I think you were definitely a source of stability for all of us. But looking back, I've just always wondered how were you able to keep it together for everybody? And just cope in your own right, because that was hard. It had to have been incredibly lonely for you to basically not have a partner like you usually did, right?
I honestly don't know. I guess definitely leaned on the Lord and prayer, and God's strength was a part of that. But I think some of it too was just going into, just keeping everything going mode. It's like depression steps in and life doesn't stop. I mean, you still have 3 little kids and a full-time job, and I was traveling a lot too. And so I felt a lot of guilt with that. I remember too, like leaving you alone in that state and leaving the kids alone. And there was a little bit of fear as to if that was going to push you over the edge, or, if the kids were going to, get what they needed at that time too. So I think a lot of it was just trying to keep everything going.
Right. And I think that was a healthy fear, because I wasn't in a good place at all and pretty low functioning. And I think what I would tell myself was, there's this many hours until Rob walks in the door at the end of the day. And I would just hold on really tight to our routines and do the bare minimum to make sure everyone got lunch and a nap and whatever. And then the minute you hit the door at the end of the day, I was just gone. And I would just go upstairs and shut the door and just pretty much check out from then on. So we were completely tag teaming. There was very little overlap in our parenting time or anything at that point.
Yeah. And I think probably in those situations, you do try to keep things normal for the kids, and so even though it wasn't normal that we weren't having like our usual, because I remember with Josh when he was young, like we were very much co-parents, like it was the 3 of us, which is a little easier as you have less kids. But I think it's so easy to explain things away when you're in the middle of those kind of situations, and so everybody tells you, oh, the third one's always the biggest adjustment because all of a sudden you're outnumbered, right? And I mean, I was traveling a lot, and I was kind of in that career mode, and you were juggling a newborn, a 3-year-old, and a 5 or 6-year-old, and I think you just kind of started homeschooling right around that time too. So there was a lot. And so it was very easy to just, this is stress, this is this is the adjustment, and not really look at the signs and the signals real clearly.
Right. Yeah. And we hadn't lived in our city for very long. We had transplanted across the country. And I think the isolation too, just the social isolation, played a big part of it. One memory I have that probably encapsulates where we were at as parents. It's one of the worst memories for me. We did all decide that we were going to take the kids to a movie. And so we're in the car, and our older daughter said, "Why can't mommy just stay home?" And I think it had hurt her spirit that mommy had been so absent so much of the time. I think that was very telling. Like, there's something broken here, and you think, the kids are small. They probably don't really know what's going on, but obviously it was hurting their little hearts too.
Yeah. And I think, in all honesty, and maybe this is an unfair generalization, I think it's true in our relationship, even, now, outside of the depression piece, that you tend to be more comfortable with emotions and feelings than I do, And so I think, and again, I think some of it goes back to that pleaser too, but I think when I would come home, I was like fun dad, like we just pretend there's no problems, It's normal for mom to go upstairs and lock the door, every night. Looking back, I'm like, well, surely the kids felt that's heavier spirit, because you couldn't just hide it. You can't just, you tried, but you can't just stuff your emotions. They were genuine feelings that you were having of sadness or anger or whatever the feelings were. And so I think that spirit kind of was over us, Yeah.
And I think they say that it is pretty typical that moms kind of set the emotional tone in the house anyway. So if mom's emotional tone is low, that's going to be somewhat of a cloud over everything. But to your point, you're always fun, Dad. I love that about you.
I love taking on that role. Like now I love being fun grandpa.
But it's hard to be fun all by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah,
for sure.
And also, there's good to that, but then also I think some of the realities that we weren't really facing, we faced it when we faced it, but we went a lot of time where we just kind of positioned ourselves around each other and made the house run as best we could, not knowing really what we were facing or looking at.
Right. And I am grateful that we did hit our tipping point. I mean, this didn't persist forever and ever.
Right.
Which is a blessing. And maybe, I know you remember that night, I had the most intense panic attack before or since. It was after we'd gone to bed and I completely lost it. I mean, I couldn't talk. I couldn't breathe. I mean, I was almost screaming. The panic was so severe. And I mean, you're just sitting there. I can't even imagine what was going through your mind, but you turned to me and you told me, we cannot do this anymore. It is time for you to get some help. And you were just very calm and very direct, like, it's time. And I think for me, I was so beaten down by then and so exhausted. I did not have the strength to ask for help myself or even really know what to do. And so you making that decision for the both of us to get help, that was just the lifeline that I needed.
Yeah. And, it's unfortunate, I think, that it had to get to that point. I mean, there's always a breaking point, right? Like, I mean, you don't know. And then, like, okay, this is more. And I think we were young and, walking something new. But so, yeah, like I said, it's easy to kind of explain those things away. And then it's like when you lost that, like when it was to that point, I'm like, okay, something's different here. And, I think it's 25 years ago, there was, still so much stigma with depression and so much still not known. And I think especially in the Christian community and in churches, like, nobody was talking about it. And so unfortunately, we did, just put on a happy face a lot of times when we went to church or when we were with friends. And, I think if I could go back and do anything differently, it would be to question things, ask for help, reach out a lot sooner and recognize the signs sooner to say, hey, maybe we need to pull other people into this.
Right. That is definitely our encouragement to anybody listening today, is to not wait and to reach out for all the support that you have available to you. I do remember a few years after we went through this season of my depression that my best friend was going through something similar. And I was just blown away by her because she was struggling so deeply, but she was so open. And I remember one day she was actually feeling suicidal and she picked up the phone and called one of our good friends from church to interrupt it. And she asked for help with meals and she asked for help with childcare because she knew her own limitations and that she needed some breathing room. And she just so actively pursued community and pursued even medical attention. And she didn't just try to muscle through like we did for too long. And that just made a really big impression on me. I learned a lot from her.
Yeah. And I think, the bright side, if one of our kids and their families had to go through this at some point, is that there is so much more available, to people. And it's not to say that there isn't still probably, we have ways to go, but there's still a lot more resources within the church and a lot more openness. I mean, I remember it seeming even strange when I said we can't go on like this, and even us looking into counseling, that seemed even a little bit stepping out. And that's pretty normal these days that people get counseling for all kinds of things, and don't have to wait till a breaking point.
Yeah, absolutely. You making that declaration that it was time to get help was major as far as moving us to a new road of healing. The other thing was just this encounter that I had with the Lord, actually, because I remember in that season, there was something about the postpartum depression that kind of started peeling back some layers of some other unfinished business I had to do around my mental health, around some things that happened in my past that I just really hadn't taken a look at before or done any healing work on before. And so I would actually take my Bible and get in the car and drive about 3 blocks from our house. We were in a new subdivision where there was a lot of open fields, and I could park at the side of one of these fields in the dark, and I would just start hashing it out with God. And I was feeling really angry, actually, like, how could God let me go through this? And how can I possibly be okay? And I was in such a state of overwhelm. And there was something about sitting in the car with God where it could just all come out, and sometimes loudly. It was a place I could cry loud. I couldn't cry loud at home in front of the kids. I didn't want to scare anybody. So that was powerful. And what I remember was I would open my Bible, and it didn't matter what page I opened it to. The only verses that I could see on the page were the verses that said that God loved me. And I knew that intellectually. I'd been a sincere believer for years enough to know that, but it's like my spirit didn't know that. And God really wanted me to fully, fully believe that I was loved. And I was in that stage of kind of arguing with him, like, yeah, I have you, but I need this and this and this and this to be a whole person, or to feel okay. And it was almost like an audible voice. And he's like, Joanna, am I enough for you, or aren't I? Can it just be me? And I really had to make a decision. Is the Lord going to be my everything and be what my soul needs, or am I going to keep wanting to add on? And having to answer that question really changed my life when I stopped looking to other things to be what I needed, and discovered that really his love really is enough. It's not just a warm saying to crochet on a pillow. It really is true. That was huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you were in the pit, and I think when you get in that pit, it is so hard to think clearly or to rationalize. And so I think that was what you needed to start pulling you out of that pit, to start seeing things with different eyes and different perspective. And I think too, when we were honest that we couldn't do this on our own, and that, we started moving towards counseling and some support and some help with friends, and, as well, church support and things, that opened the door for you to be able to take those things to God. So they kind of worked hand in hand, but then that also helped us be able to talk more about what was going on too, and how it was affecting us, and how we could work more as a team through that, so that it didn't have to be me trying to carry this side and you over here, and, or you trying to carry through the day on your own until I showed up and you could leave, but it was a process. And I think as we said, it started with, obviously God was there all along, but it started with that kind of asking for help, and that opening your heart to be able to really go to God, like with what you really needed, and let him fill you up.
And, I do think in the time leading up to that encounter with God, that he was using you to get me ready to hear him, because I have to say the kind of grace that you were able to give me in that was remarkable to me, because you would sit on the couch by me and listen to me cry and give you the list of all my hurts over and over. And at any point you could have been like, Joanna, this is the same song, 200th verse. I've heard this all before. And you never seem to lose your capacity to just listen. And I was carrying such a unbearably heavy weight of shame at the time. Like, surely if I was a better Christian, I wouldn't be battling this. And surely if I was a better mom, I wouldn't be taking my feelings out on my kids and I could show up for them better. I mean, surely if I was just a better person, I could be stronger and beat this thing. And I couldn't do it. And I just felt so small. And there was never a moment from you where I felt judged by you or criticized by you or less than in your eyes, even though that cost you a lot for me to go through that. And I think that God let me experience a lot of what his love is like from you, so that when God said that to me, that he loved me, it made it a lot easier to believe, because I had already been experiencing it in our marriage. And that was huge for me. I hope you know that.
Yeah, I do, because you've communicated that in different ways through the years as we've talked about it. But I think too, it's definitely God's power, because I don't think I could have done that. I mean, there's definitely times where I was just pulling myself up by my bootstraps and trying to keep it going. But I think I definitely had my own conversations with God in the car at times, driving to work or driving home, asking, how to handle this. But I think it was what marriage is supposed to be. And it's the hard side that you don't like to face or focus on, of the sickness and health. And, we like to think of the health, but, the sickness and not as healthy, whether physically or mentally or whatever. The reality is we both had those seasons, and that was probably a larger one, or, earlier on in our marriage that we had to face. But, we've definitely had seasons where you've had to be stronger and show more grace. And so ultimately, God's forgiven us all of our sins. And that's the beautiful, I remember, was it in Ephesians, the verse that we put in our marriage vows? I will forgive as I've been forgiven, and I think if we honestly take hold of how God's forgiven us, and I believe that season helped me understand more deeply, because I had to really think through what those words meant, and like how forgiven am I, especially when you grow up in a Christian home and that kind of thing. You think, what have I really been forgiven from? And so, I think it forced me to look at that and recognize that, we can only extend the mercy to the extent that we understand it's been extended to us. And, God's mercy is everlasting. So
I think, like you said, that God did allow us to have to walk that hard road for a while, because we did have to learn, that grace isn't just a nice, warm, fuzzy thought out of the Bible. It's a real boots on the ground, day in, day out thing that we can give to one another. And grace is a huge gateway to healing. As we learned how to practice that with each other, it increased our ability to understand the grace that God's giving, and like you said, begin to apply that to the other hard things that continued on in life, because life is hard. Mm-hmm. Life is hard, and when you can experience that kind of just unconditional grace with each other, you're a lot more ready to take what comes, right?
Yeah, and it was not I don't know. We definitely had our moments. It was not a easy or perfect road. You definitely look back and see God's grace in it, because sometimes it does just feel like you were kind of in survival mode, and then you look back and you just see how God met you in it and was faithful in it. But it's so hard sometimes to see it in the midst of it,
Yeah. So our encouragement to you today is just to remember that you are not alone, and your spouse might be struggling in a place where they don't have a lot of support to give at this time, or they don't really know how to meet you in your pain, but the Lord always does. And when we pray, he does listen. He does answer. He gives us what we need one day at a time to keep getting our head up and keep on moving forward. And I feel like our marriage is just a story, not about how we figured things out, but how we discovered who God really can be to us. God can change anything and everything.
Yeah. When you look back with 33 years of perspective, and I'm sure there's going to be seasons where in year 40, where we'll need year 50 to look back and go, oh yeah, okay, year 40, that's what God was doing. It doesn't stop. But I definitely think, I think of David saying in his later years in life, I look back and see the faithfulness of God. I never begged for bread, or I never, and I think definitely we look back and we see what God did in all of that and how he taught us, like just even like you were sharing about understanding how God's love was all you needed. Like that's the season that God worked that out in you and pulled that out of you and just all the ways he provided and the ways he did open us to see the importance again of why he created the church and community and not to shy away from that and all those things, like just to see his goodness and faithfulness. And, before we close today, I think we always try to end our programs in prayer. And I think it might be appropriate. Joanna wrote a book, came out recently, 101 Prayers to Cope with Depression. And I thought it might be good to end with a prayer that I read in there and just read this as kind of our closing prayer. This is my help and my hope. And the verse is Jeremiah 17:14. Heal me, Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved. For you are the one I praise. And the prayer says, Lord, each time I think depression is in the past, it brings me low once more. I wrestle again with fatigue, sadness, anger, and shame. Life's sweetest gifts, the beauty of the seasons, time with loved ones, creative projects and plans no longer delight my spirit. Will I ever celebrate a strength and joy that lasts? I place my future in your hands today. You can heal what's broken. You can renew my mind so I believe the truth of who I am as your beloved child. Your power can save me from harm and redeem the pain of the past. In you, I will be made new. I praise you for your goodness, love, and power to save. You give me hope. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Rob. And thank you, friends, so much for taking time to listen to our story and share this time with us today. Rob and I would love to connect with you over on our website at growinghometogether.com. You're going to find all kinds of resources to help you pray as a couple, to pray for your kids, and like Rob just read, to pray for hope in your depression too. At Growing Home Together, we are caring for the soul of your family
and growing home together with you. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Growing Home Together podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and found some valuable insights to help you care for the soul of your family. Remember to check out growinghometogether.com for more resources, and stay tuned for our next episode coming your way soon.